Contemporary art reflects society. So you can't blame Damien Hirst for making a piece with 10 million diamonds glued onto it, because he was just a factor of his time.
One British artist whose work was identified with the boom is Turner Prize winner Keith Tyson. He saw the crash coming, moved his studio from London to the south coast and downsized, relatively.
I tried to get back to brass tacks, really. That was about 18 months before it happened, and so I'm quite thankful, because I'd probably be bankrupt if I hadn't.
He still has assistants, though not quite on the scale he once had.
If you've got to make a sculpture with 300 parts, all of which are finely crafted with 100 assistants, even on the minimum wage, which I pay a lot more than, it would seem that that's going to cost a lot of money. But it pales into insignificance compared to producing a movie. Can't remember what a Trident submarine costs to make, but it's a lot. and what's the consequence of a missile being fired? And what's the consequence of a painting being out in the world inspiring or challenging people? I think it's pretty good value, really.
But the art market is only a small part of the art scene in Britain today. Arts institutions and arts education touch far more people, and they too are under pressure. Since the 70s, business has had an increasing role in funding the arts, and it's a role that is now at risk.
It's like a third. It's third public, third earned income, box office and marketing, and third from the private sector. But of course people have less money to buy tickets, less money to be philanthropists or sponsors, and of course the state will cut back inevitably. But we're hearing that in Italy, half the opera houses in Italy may go bust forever. We're seeing a frightening scenario where the whole cultural scene in Europe could actually be transformed, and in America, devastated.
While America's attempt at getting arts funding sorted was being stymied by fear of communism, Britain was on the brink of starting state funding itself, and this is how it happened. In the 30s in America, writers were going out to discover and document their own country, at the government's expense. Here, writers like Orwell were doing the same, off their own bat. The year that he wrote The Road to Wigan Pier, a surrealist poet and an anthropologist formed mass observation, sending researchers out to take notes and photograph the everyday life of ordinary people. To the mass observers, Pitman painters were irresistible.
Before you knew where you were, these were the Ashington group. The documentary photographers swarmed up here and photographed them at work or in recreation.
From mass observation, I take it.
Mass observation, the social anthropologists, all down from Cambridge, straight out into the field, and the Pitmen kept their distance from all these well-wishers and do-gooders. They decided that this was exploiting them just as much as you could say Colin has exploited Pitman. On the other hand, it did lead to them getting to know Helen Sutherland, whose father had been chairman of the P&O line and was therefore seriously rich and lived nearby. And she came and saw their work, and she introduced them to Ben Nicholson and David Jones and Barbara Hepworth, etc. And so the connection between Pitman and the English avant-garde of the time was established, and it worked. It put Ben Nicholson white reliefs next to pictures of Pitman at work, and there was no pretension about it whatsoever.
So the Pitman painters wanted to plough their own furrow and go where their art took them. But when war broke out, everything changed. Now came Britain's closest equivalent to America's New Deal. This was the first time the state got heavily involved in culture, paying artists like Henry Moore to document the war effort. The Ministry of Information set up the War Artists Scheme in 1939. It was devised by Sir Kenneth Clarke, then director of the National Gallery. One of his tasks was to organise the safeguarding of the national collections. Paintings like children were evacuated from the cities. They were taken away and hidden down the mines in Wales. Most of the pitmen painters were, of course, down the mines already, working throughout the war to supply coal for the nation. They got marginally involved in the War Artists Scheme, though they were never paid for their efforts.
Kenneth Clarke and his friends got jobs, all his favourites, John Piper, Graham Sutherland, Henry Moore, Edward Borden, Edward Ardizzoni. It was a way of keeping them out of the forces as well, because they were too valuable to expend. I mean, Ben Nicholson once famously said he thought that the Second World War was being fought for people like him because he was one of the national treasures. You could see what he meant, but equally you could see that he should have perhaps shut up about it.
But what's the point in all this here art? Pretty pictures don't win anything. Not now, anyway.
We all know what we're fighting against. But don't you think we sometimes forget what we're fighting for?
Not pretty pictures.
Yes, but they're part of it. We've got to fight, because if we didn't, we wouldn't be free. Free to work, to play, to listen, to look at what we want to.
I like that, but I don't know why.
Well, I'll tell you why I like it. Look how the artist is taking your eye up these steps, and then along past these two little figures right out to sea to the end of the breakwater. It sort of takes you on a journey.
Artists were sent around the country to do paintings of the war-torn landscape. It was a little bit like the New Deal photographers going out to look at the Dust Bowl. It was a little bit like that, and some wonderful paintings came out of it.
Kenneth Clarke wanted to celebrate the British countryside before it was ruined, not just by war, but by that other evil, progress. So the impulse was conservative, but the energy released was electric. Everyone joined in.
Something remarkable, absolutely remarkable, happened during the war. The theatre suddenly was right at the heart of society.
We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so base. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, while Denny speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day.
Speaking for Britain, speaking for the values that we were supporting. And the actors and actresses became sort of national heroes during that period. And that the very gesture of the theatre's continuing was in itself a kind of rallying cry to the nation.
There was a painting of the month at the National Gallery, where they'd bring a painting up from the mines where they were buried and protected from the Luftwaffe and put them on show. It would be advertised, one painting, and there'd be queues around Trafalgar Square and lunchtime concerts with Myra Hess, you know, playing the Moonlight. And there's a famous documentary by Humphrey Jennings where he shows all this going on. Listen to Britain. It was under threat. It was scarce. The difficulty of getting to the arts made them very special.
Documentary makers, dancers, everyone rallied round. Art in the broadest sense became part of the national conversation. It would change its status forever.
One really shouldn't forget the massive amount of touring which went on across the country right through the war and dangerously into Europe just before the fall of France and all of that.
An all-star entertainment in France is certainly the stuff to give the troops.
And out of this came CIMA, the Council for the Encouragement of Music and the Arts.
The ballet, once the pleasure of a favoured few, is nowadays the delight of thousands of theatre-goers. But there are many more would-be admirers of ballet if only they had the time to go. Now CIMA is helping to solve this problem by taking the ballet into the factories. Here is Madame Rambert's company arriving at a workers' hostel in the Midlands.
The idea of art for all had well and truly arrived in Britain.
This allows them time to exchange views with the factory workers.
During even the darkest days of the war, there was this sense that we must prepare for the peace, and we must make a better peace than we had before the war.
Worker and artist, each recognizes the hard work which goes to make the other's success.
The flame of the war brought it to the boil. After the war, SEMA became the Arts Council, so it was very much a response to the distress, the fear, the uncertainty of the war.
The Arts Council was the brainchild of economist John Maynard Keynes.
There really seems to be some providence which watches over this country.
He saw off critics to the right who objected to any state subsidy of the arts as a road to mediocrity or propaganda. And critics to the left, they preferred the populism of the wartime SEMA. The left were wary of high art elitism. But it was Bloomsbury man Keynes whose vision prevailed.
The artist walks where the breath of the spirit blows him. He cannot be told his direction, he doesn't know it himself. But he leads the rest of us into fresh pastures and teaches us to love and to enjoy what we often begin by rejecting, enlarging our sensibility and purifying our instincts.
This is when he was simultaneously sorting out the International Monetary Fund, flying over to Washington every other day. It's wonderful, really.
The task of an official body is not to teach or to censor, but to give courage, confidence, and opportunity. New work will spring up when there is a universal opportunity, contact with traditional and contemporary arts in their noblest forms. But don't think of the Arts Council as a schoolmaster. Your enjoyment will be our first aim. We have but little money to spill, and it will be you yourselves who will decide in the long run what you get. Insofar as we instruct, it is a new game we are teaching you to play and to watch.
The Arts Council came out of two tendencies, really. SEMA, which had put the performing and visual arts around the country during the Second World War and had been amazed by the demand. And partly Maynard Keynes' obsession with Stalinist Russia and fascist Germany, where the arts had been completely politicised, aestheticisation of politics. And so he wanted an organisation that was completely at arm's length from the government. He wanted it to be neither the sort of statist approach, which you got on the continent of Europe, where the state did everything, nor the private sector approach of the United States, where you had corporations calling the shots. It was a kind of mixed economy approach, where you'd have lots of public money, but matched by private money. It was a very, very British compromise, I think.
This was a critical moment, when the purely private was becoming public. Art treasures had long been in aristocratic hands, available only to a chosen few. This is Bridgewater House, which housed an extraordinary private art collection which included the Titians, which there is now a campaign to save for the nation. And if you were lucky enough to receive an invitation like this, you could actually go and visit the gallery by the back entrance, press the bell. Since the 1920s, when the government was faced with the crisis of a stream of privately owned masterpieces leaving Britain, there had been a paramount list. A secret list of works of art deemed to be of such outstanding quality that they should not, under any circumstance, be allowed to leave the country.
Good afternoon.
Many of them were here.
Thank you. So this is the only bit of Bridgewater House Gallery that actually remains after it got bombed in 1943. As you can see, it's a very decorative type building. The gallery went out in that direction for about 20 yards, and this is where all the paintings would have been. There would have been the Titians, the Raphaels, etc., which were allowed in by invitation. It would be students of the Royal Academy and acquaintances of of the Earl of Ellesmere.